Madam Chair, you're live.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It is 6:03, and I'm going to call the Committee of the Whole, the budget meeting process to order. Attendance, Councillor Bob Morton and Councillor Larry Pinch are running about 5-10 minutes behind, so we do have quorum, so we will start. Approval of the agenda, including any additions or deletions. So the agenda was circulated in the package. Is there any additions or deletions anyone wants to offer? Seeing none, then we'll accept the agenda as circulated. Does anyone have any declaration or conflict of interest? Seeing no lights, there's no conflicts, we'll move along. Just a note from me, West Hants Regional Municipalities in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This land is governed by the treaties and peace and friendship signed in 1726. West Hants Regional Municipality recognizes we are all treaty people and have responsibilities to this land and each other. West Hants Regional Municipality also recognizes African Nova Scotians are a distinct people whose history and legacy contributions have enriched that part of Mi'kma'ki known as Nova Scotia for over 400 years. And the last one I'm going to make, Council Committee as chair, we're committed to ensuring this meeting and its participants conduct themselves in a respectful and professional manner as outlined in the municipality's municipal code of conduct. Meeting presenters, staff, and the public are expected to conduct themselves in an equally respectful manner at all times during the meeting as it's being conducted. I thank you all in advance for your commitment to these important meeting procedures. So that's all for me. Council, anyone else have any announcements they would like to make at this time? Seeing none, we're going to move along. And it's an introduction and overview of the 2026-27 budget. And I'm going to turn it over to our CAO, Mark Phillips, and our Director of Finance, Carly Rochon.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be quick. We really don't have a lot of ceremony sometimes around this, but to kind of set the stage for the director. Want to thank everybody, the department heads and fire services and others. This was a earlier schedule and probably a condensed schedule compared to historic budget preparation, all to try to get this in front of council at an earlier date. So thank you, everyone. But we do recognize that sometimes we may have some accuracy items that as we go through the budget that we may not have as much confirmation on some items as we have in the past. But I do think we have a pretty good sense of where some of those items are going to land. Of course, the budget that is in front of you it reflects the budget that was given to you 3 weeks ago now, probably. Somewhere's in that range. So again, there may be some updates that we're aware of and or additions and or reductions, just as the nature of the last 2 or 3 weeks and the information comes in. So we'll reserve a little bit of space for that kind of discussion as we go through each department. And I think Carly's prepared to do that. Just with respect to the themes, I think you'll start to see, again, ultimately the tax rates and the area rates are subject to council. But I think from my perspective, we start to see some separation and some tiers perhaps starting to develop between the service delivery and what we might call rural West Hants and what folks in Windsor and the Hantsport area with respect to the rates that they're paying and the differences between a person living in those communities and the percentage differences. So, I don't know that we'll ever come to a time where everyone is paying the same rate. I think there's probably always going to be a differentiation between living in a growth center or a former town and the services you deliver and how you pay for those things. But I think we're starting to see those level out a little bit and perhaps be a little bit more appropriately separated between the base rate. But again, that's something we'll see, and I know Carly will touch on. And finally, it's ultimately up to council, but I think Carly, your folks are used to Carly's presentations, probably up till tomorrow afternoon. You're probably going to encourage comments, questions, but if someone would like to see a change or a little of this or a little of that, I think she's reserved some time later in tomorrow's afternoon as she gets through the bulk of operating and capital budget, where they're looking for changes or so forth, she's prepared to do that at that time. I know she and I have been doing that throughout the last couple of days, and we're making our own little list. So I think she would prefer, if we could, to have questions and so forth, and then we'll take those changes and process them, after. Because sometimes some of these things are addressed as she continues to kind of go through the totality of the budget. So anyway, thank you everyone for the time you've dedicated. Thank you for your time. Thanks for the folks that have been here, and the show is yours, Carolyn.
Thank you. So I won't add much to that opening statement, but I will say again, just as this is a condensed year, so also there will be a little less, of course, information that I have available to me because there hasn't been as much engagement along the process. So I will be relying on the folks around the table and that are here to support me this evening. As well as, again, to Mark's point, just kind of holding off any direction until later. If there is some specific direction I need, I will ask specifically to kind of get your guys' opinion so I can move forward if it's something I've already kind of identified. But overall budget direction, I kind of set aside a little bit more time tomorrow for us to kind of work through all that. So tonight on our agenda, we have, of course, our general overview, and then we're going to get into protective services. We'll have a quick break, and then we'll get into our water utility. And then we will end for this evening and then start again tomorrow. So if everybody's good with that, or if you have any questions before we get started.
No, we look
Okay.
good, so carry on.
Perfect. I'm just going to share my screen and get this rolling. That's not what I wanted. I just did the test. Hmm. Hmm. Perfect. Excellent. Okay. So we are going into our first day of our agenda. This is, of course, for budget year 26-27. Just a quick highlight of what we have in front of us. We have tax revenue up about 2.9 million or 9.2% increase over 2025-26 budget. We have our first full year of our extender producer responsibility as a new revenue source, or as you'll see in the budget detail under circular material. That's about a 400,000 increase or 300,000 over last year's increase. And then we have 2.3, so of that 2.9, 2.3 million is additional tax revenue if all rates and everything were to stay the same. So that's what we would consider the lift, and I'll be talking about that in a little while. Some of the revenue that we held, which again I'll be talking about, is deed transfer tax as well as our host community fees for the landfill. Under the expenses, we have debt servicing and transfers up. Before debt servicing and transfers, we have 2.1 million or 6.5% over the 25-26 budget. We have expenses of minimum wage that are going to be increasing again twice this year. We have mandatory remittances through our payroll that have increased this year. Not only have the rate increases, but the ceiling thresholds have increased too. And then, of course, we're seeing, again, like any other year, insurance rates, power rates, and utility rates going up. So those are big areas. Our residential and nonprofit grants are representing about 3.5% of our budget this year. So that is down in comparison to the previous year. And then we have an increase in debt servicing costs of 1 million. And of that 1,996,000 is new debt. We increased our operating reserve contribution by 25,000 towards the fire operating reserve. And then we have actually decreased our capital reserve contributions by 346,000. Within capital, we have a $40.5 million schedule of projects for this year, including carryover projects from 2025-26. And of that carryover, 17 million makes up that number. So 17 million of the 40 is related to carryover. We have 22.3 million being funded through long-term debt, and debt servicing ratio is projected this year to be 8.5%, which is in the green category, which we will review a little bit more later. Our next slide I thought would be a good addition to the overall budget, not only for council around the table, but also if public was looking. We have financial condition indicator highlights from our 23-24 report from the provincial government. We are currently at low risk. All of our indicators are currently in the green category, except for our uncollected taxes, which we have reviewed within our audit committee. But what you'll note there is, again, this is representing all the debt that we've actually borrowed as of 23-24, and you'll see that our debt service ratio is at 6.8. So again, our debt ratio is based on everything getting done. Their debt ratio is based on everything that we've actually borrowed against. So just kind of note that that's why there's a little variance there. So going into our operating budget, as seen on, I believe, page 8 of our binders, we have our overall balance. We're seeing an 8.8 increase over last year, and we're at 40 million.4. We're seeing an overall change of 3.2 million. And I'm going to be going into some of these categories here in a little bit, but just to kind of remind people what falls within these categories. So taxes include sewer revenue, tax revenue, detransfer tax, and business properties. Sale of services includes wind farms, community development revenue. Services provided by other governments includes recycling and enforcement, host community fees, circular materials, administration fees. And then our other revenue includes interest and penalties, return on investment, administrative rentals, leases, fines, permits, etc. Under the expense categories, you'll see general government services. That includes our legislative, our administrative, financial services, municipal buildings. Protective services includes RCMP, fire, our REMO, our bylaw, courthouse, building inspection, and food banks. Environmental development services includes planning and community economic development. Environmental health services includes sewer, waste collection, waste diversion, and landfill. Recreation and cultural services includes community development department, less the community economic development. And then it includes also libraries. Under public health services, it includes cemeteries. So that's what you're seeing under public health services. All right, so moving into our revenue for 26-27. So under our revenue, we're seeing our increases, of course, in general, our tax rates based on what was presented in the budget. But one of the things I'll note within the tax area is our special assessments. So you'll notice that that is decreased. This was an estimate based on what the motion made by council was for the supplement of the crossing rate. So I have gotten a final number from all the data I needed as part of that calculation. So I will be able to increase that by 15,000. So that's you'll see on the next iteration of the operating budget numbers as part of the adjustments as we go through deliberations. Our business property revenue is decreasing, and that's again just based on our assessments and rates based on that. And there's been no confirmation from Bell or the province on any of the amounts for 26-27. I'll also note that our HST offset grant that we receive is based on estimates from the 24-25 GST remittances to CRA. So grants in lieu of taxes, again, are based on assessment changes and rate changes. So we are seeing a decrease in that. Our services to other local governments have increased associated to the host community fees. So by about 3% from 716 to 737. We're also seeing a decrease in funding from the Department of Justice for the courthouse. And also the addition of the full year of circular materials under this category, which is increased 300,000 from last year up to 400,000. Under our sale of services, we have a reduction in revenue for the community development and programs by 2.4%. However, we have a 1% increase for the wind farm revenue. And we'll go over the community development decreases tomorrow during their presentation. Then we have our other revenue, and this is just increased based on what the averages we're seeing over the last few years. And then we have our transfers. So under our transfers, we have no information from the province yet on any of the changes relating to municipal financial capacity grant or the farm property acreage. So we left those very stable and conservative. Also, then under the other conditional transfers, we have changes to the Kings County funding for the Hansport Fire Department and the municipal percentage. So our Kings County percentage of calls has increased to 48.6%. Our operational portion is capped this year at 131,400 or 47.2. And that's based on the agreement that we have with Kings. So this summarizes all of the changes. So we have our 3.2 there at the bottom, so it should all seem relatively clear. Property taxes includes the Nova Scotia Power Alliance, the HST rebate, detransfer tax, all of that under this category. I just realized I don't have a little pen on. Give me a sec. Under this category, did that come up? There we go. And then we're seeing the decrease due to assessment within the grants in lieu and taxes. We're seeing the overall increase in the other government. Again, 300,000 of that is just associated to the circular materials. So we're only seeing about a 32,000 increase in addition to that new revenue source. And then under our sales services, we're seeing that decrease, as I mentioned, from community development. And then our other revenue increases just again based on where we're seeing averages coming in. Sorry. And then our transfers, again, that's from the transfers from the Kings County. So that's where you're seeing that little bit of an increase there. All right. So overall, under 26-27, we have a $40.4 million budget. 84.9% of that is coming from taxes. As you can see, we have a very small percentage that comes from other revenue sources. Our biggest being our services provided to other local governments, followed very closely by our unconditional transfers from the province. So again, those are agreements that we have. And then, of course, through the municipal MOU that we have with the province, that's where the 4% comes from. So under the proposed expenses for 26-27, we have our general government services an increase in 572. We have our protective services increase of 443, transportation of 148, environmental health services of 43, public health services of 4,000, environmental development of 76, recreation and cultural services increase of 454, and education of 437.76, and then debt transfer of 1,089,50. So when we look at that, we see the decrease in these various over the next couple budget sessions. But I wanted to highlight a few of those items as we're kind of going through the next few days. So I'll highlight anything and we'll go over a few of the categories in the next few slides. So under the expenditures mandated by the province, this would include the library, provincial roads, prosecuting attorney, regional housing authority, which this, again, I'm just showing you that's zero, that's coming off. And then the assessment services and through PVSC, and then the mandatory education. So within that, we have a lift in our UA, or uniform assessment, which means that because we have a increase in our uniform assessment means we pay more in education because they're correlated based on the formula. So that led to the 7% increase there. We also don't have a lot of information based on where the province is going to land on some of these. So you'll notice there's some that are conservative. We've received notice, for instance, with the library, and we have the decision made by council yesterday to maintain that increase. And then we also have assessment services, which is estimated. We haven't received the notification from PVSC yet, but I've estimated an increase of 2.6 based on the capped assessment increase. Overall, this 7.5 million represents about 0.3231 on the general tax rate for residential and 38 cents on the general commercial rate. Under the general rate expenditures for the municipality. So this is where the bulk of our costs are. We have our general government services. That includes legislative, it includes financial services, the CEO's office, IT, the office buildings, all of that would be under that category. And then getting into protective services, we're seeing an increase there. Again, as I mentioned before, that encompasses a lot of various departments, which we'll review in detail. The biggest thing I'll highlight is that the water and hydrant fee increased from the previous year. So that has increased 6.9% or 108,000. And then fire increased by 214,000, which again, we'll go over. We have the motion of council to approve the funding for 44,000 for the food bank. So that's up to March 31st of 2027. So that's in the budget. We also have the debt increase by 996,642 in here because it is all new debt. So it would be represented in here. Okay. Going to the West Hants area rate expenditures, a lot less in here. So the first category only includes basically the debt or the municipal operations building here at 76 Morrison Drive. So we're seeing a 7.1 increase associated to that. These categories may have historical debt within them as well, but you'll see that the debt figure I've kind of, so that it's easier and more consistent and for council, it's at the bottom. So 703,676. And then we have our 70% of our RCMP costs in here, which again, RCMP overall is seeing a 0.9% increase. And we're seeing the 70% of that right here. So for those three expenses, that totals the 5.3 million that we're seeing for the West Hants area rate. The next one that we'll see is Hantsport area rate expenditures for the municipal services. So again, not a lot in here, but we have the cemetery, which is showing an increase, which we've seen in the public health services earlier before. We also see the regional economic development that's associated to the downtown business societies that got moved to the commercial rates for Hantsport. And then we have HMCC, which again is part of the area rated there. You'll see that there's no debt this year for Hansport. They've completely paid off their debt, so there's no more debt for them moving forward. And then a transfer to reserves of 284,500. So then we look at the Windsor area rate expenditures. So these again are residential specific expenditures under the Windsor area rate for the both residential and commercial. So what you're seeing in the first column here is our general government services are associated to 100 King Street. And then we have our general protective services, which is the 30% of the RCMP, also showing the 0.9% increase as RCMP is increased by 0.9. We have the cemetery in Windsor under this category showing an increase. And then we have the Downtown Business Society or the township showing in the regional economic development. Again, that's specifically under the commercial side of the tax rate. And then we have our net transfer to reserves, which is 1.1 million, which is a slight decrease from last year. So then we have our transfers to and from reserves. This kind of just, again, was all previously presented in each of the different categories, but summarized here. So within the 900,000, we have 100,050 coming from operating reserve to fund the 150,000 for the GFL rink grant. We have the 25,000, you can see here, the $25,000 increase to 125,000 for the fire operating reserve. We're going to maintain our boundary and our election reserve contributions. So those can just go into the reserve every 4 years, and then we take them out every 4 years because we know it's an expense that only happens every 4 years. And that helps us smooth the tax rate too, so we don't have a blip every 4 years when we have to have an election or a boundary review. We have our RCMP reserve, which we have reduced based on where we were thinking we were going to be at. However, we had a meeting with RCMP for the third quarter, and the reports we received are projecting a higher surplus than we anticipated. So we're recommending we increase this transfer from the RCMP at a minimum at least to the 25-26 transfer. If not, council can consider more, but we'll discuss that a little bit more tomorrow. And then, of course, we don't have any more consolidation funding for operations, so that you're seeing is a reduction. The Housing Accelerator Fund still going strong, but we're getting closer to the end of that funding, so we're seeing that reduction as well as we get closer to the end. The carryover reserve represents the home flood protection program and the recipients who haven't received their funding yet. So this is the carryover, assuming that all recipients will receive their funding in 2025. So it negates that cost in the CAC budget, which we'll see tomorrow. There's also other small carryover projects that, based on the current operating budget, weren't able to get completed. Instead of adding them back in, we put them into the reserve and then bring them over. So some of that is through the CAC. So the CAC has a plan funding that they use for their work plan. So some of that unused funding gets carried over for the year to add to either more grant utilization or other kind of opportunities that arise through CAC. So that's an example of that. And I believe they're carrying over 8,000 this year. So then we're going to maintain our capital funding transfer of 850, which gets divided into various reserves. And then we have our asset retirement obligation reserve transfer. And this is a required transfer as per the public sector accounting standards. And this also requires an annual review. So I'm just noting this is because the annual review literally was just done. And we're noting that there's going to have to be a significant increase in that transfer. So it'll be increasing during our deliberation process by about 339,000. We don't have any transfers to or from any reserves in West Hants. And then under Hansport, we have a transfer to the infrastructure reserve of 244,000. We have an operating reserve transfer of 40,000, and we have a Windsor rate transfer. Under the Windsor area rate, we have a transfer to the operating reserve of 710. And then we have a Windsor infrastructure reserve transfer of 489,500. All of those net together to about 10.9% increase over the previous year. However, our actual contributions to and from reserves, when we look at them together instead of lumped and netted, are increasing too and decreasing as well. Right. So based on our total operating budget, just based on where everything's going, we're still seeing that protective services is the biggest chunk of our operating budget at 27.8% of our operating budget, followed very closely by education at 16.6. And then we have, of course, our general government services, our debt transfers, and our other categories kind of all around here, the recreation services, environmental development. So all of them kind of make up this little piece of the pie. And this little number here, this one's public health services, the 0.2. So looking at the proposed changes and assessment changes, as well as the mandatory rates, I thought it would be good to kind of review some of the information that we received in our assessment roll. So within the 2026 assessment roll, we had 151 new dwellings. The average taxable residential assessment was 227,411. We have 88% of our residential properties under cap and 558 property sales. And that would include commercial sales, apartment building sales, residential sales, as well as vacant land sales. Of this sales, it also would exclude anything that is considered an unqualified sale. So a non-arm's length transaction, bankruptcy, tax sale, the $0 transfers or the $1 transfers. So those wouldn't be included in the 558. Also, you'll see this little pie chart here. So this actually tells us the breakdown of how many accounts we actually have on our roll, which is 13,500 residential. And we have a small 649 of commercial and then 78 of apartments. And apartments, as you can see here, are basically considered anything with more than 3 self-contained living units. So the sales represent, if we use this number over here, 3.9% of our total accounts. So very interesting. And particularly the average taxable residential assessment. So as we're going through looking at the impacts and changes, you can kind of use that number to help guide you when you're kind of figuring out those changes. So overall, from year to year, our assessment for residential and resource has increased by 160 million. This is an 8.1 increase. This is our residential net taxable assessment, which means it's our PVS roll number less any appeals, and PVSC estimates about 2% of appeal rate. So we use that number to be consistent. It also includes added grants in lieu and less any capped variance between market and capped value. So the change in our assessment, if all factors stayed the same and all the rates stayed the same, would be $2,386,034. PVSC, as I mentioned, their cap change this year was 2.6%. So on average, if you're 88% of our accounts, our residential accounts, are considered cap. So 88% of our accounts will see a 2.6% increase just in their assessment, depending on their market area. And then they also provide us with an estimate of what they're seeing in appeals. And so they estimate that 2% of appeals. So moving into commercial, which is nice to see because the last few years we've been kind of seeing a little bit of a decline in commercial, but we're seeing an increase in commercial by 11,233,112. So that's a 7.2 increase in the net commercial rate. So the difference within the net commercial is you're not going to have cap reduction. So this will just be less appeals. So the 2% and then any grants in lieu and taxes under the province. So looking at just the tax revenue in comparison from year to year by the area rate. So we're seeing here that the general rate in 26-27 is making up 66.5 of the total taxes collected. The West Hants rate is making up 18.5%. The Hantsport rate is making up 1.3%. And the Windsor rate is making up 13.7%. Overall, the change in taxes, the variance over here on the side. So we're seeing a slight 1.9% increase in overall taxes collected from last year on the general rate, 0.8% on the West Hants rate. We're actually seeing a decrease of 0.6 on the Hantsport rate and a decrease on the collection on the Windsor rate by negative 2%. Overall, the change, as mentioned earlier, is 2.9 million. This is another slide that you'll see probably multiple times as we're going through this, but this is the kind of numbers to keep in your head. So as we look at the assessment role and we look at what that looks like, we also analyze what a penny's worth in each of those areas. So what you're seeing on this one here is the residential rate under general is worth 212,000. Under West Hants, it's 184,000. Under Hantsport, it's 9,000, and under Windsor, it's 28,000. So what that means is if we change anything by 1 cent in any of those areas, that's how much it would be, we would need to change it. Same goes with the commercial underneath. I won't go through each of those numbers, but we are seeing a decrease in the penny rate based on the Hantsport commercial. So going into, and again, this is a refresh slide, area rate versus general rate impacts. So this is just an example of kind of how area rates and general rates kind of are related and how they impact each other. So if we removed 50,000 from an area rate, you can kind of see what the rate impact would be there. So under West Hants, that would be 29 cents. Under Hantsport, 5.8 cents. Or $5.84, sorry. And then under Windsor, it would be $1.96. But when we add that to the general rate, it increases the general rate by 25 cents. So the net impact of those changes, you can see vary within the various communities depending on how much their penny's worth. So if we think back to what a penny's worth in West Hants, a penny is worth 186, but a penny's worth in the general rate 212. So, but a penny in Hantsport is 9,000 in comparison to 212. So that's why you see the big decrease, but then it can kind of account for the increase in the general rate to then net together to decrease that. So the decreases will vary, but that's kind of just when you're thinking about moving things from general rate to area rate or area rate to general rate, these are the kind of calculations you'll need to kind of remember. All right. So then we'll get into our residential property tax rates for 2026-27. So we have proposed a general rate increase. It is increasing by 5 cents. It is 83.8331 cents. Then we see a proposed increase in the West Hants rate of 7 cents, a proposed decrease in the or Hansport rate of 9 cents and a proposed decrease in the Windsor rate of 9 cents. Going into the commercial rate. So proposed commercial rates for 2026-27, we have proposed a general rate to maintain the general rate of 98 cents, which is applicable to all communities. We're maintaining the area rate for West Hants at 80 cents. We've proposed a 5-cent decrease to the area rate for commercial to 2.72, and we've proposed a decrease of 5 cents to the Windsor area rate to 2.82. So that results in a 5-cent decrease in both of those areas. So one of the reasons that recommendation was made is, again, just looking at the overall impact from the residential rate. So we're seeing the decreases on the residential side. So for example, and I actually had a counselor ask me this, so I'm just kind of repeating kind of what I answered to them. But when we examined the rates, so using Hansport as the example, a 1 cent change in the Hansport commercial rate is $1,718. So the total that represents in that 5 cents is $8,589. So it's not a big change. And by comparison, 1 cent on the Hansport residential rate generates $9,195. So to reduce the commercial rate by 5 cents, to also, when you're seeing a increase or a decrease on the residential rate, we opted to share the decrease between the residential and the commercial rates. So we reduced the commercial rate and then we took from the residential side. So the residential side didn't see the 1 cent decrease further. And then the same logic could be applied to Windsor. Windsor's 5 cents amounts to $34,653. So when we look at what the residential rate is, a cent on the Windsor rate, it's 28,137. So again, just a little over a penny on the Windsor residential rate to reduce the commercial rate by 5 cents. So looking at our mandatory rates next, I kind of just broke them all down. We already see our mandatory cost table, but just so you know, our percentage of our general rate that's represented by provincial rated items is 36.9%. So that's already approved as part of the general rate or presented as part of the proposed general rate. So what this basically says, when we take that amount out of the various rates on what the provincial portion, the RCMP and the PVSC, all the items that we can't necessarily control or eliminate, it leaves us with a small amount that's actually going to the municipal expense costs. So within the West Hants community, of the total rate, 50.8% is going to municipal costs. Of the total Hansport rate, 57.9 is going to the operating costs of the municipality. Under the Windsor rate, 56.6 of the rate is going towards the operating of the municipality. In that, we also, through this exercise, look at basically a rate comparison. And if you're looking at the rates based on where Hansport is, it's 17% more to live in Hansport than West Hants. And if you're looking at the Windsor rate, it's 44% more to live in Windsor versus West Hants. So under the proposed commercial tax rate municipal portion, you can see that, again, I'm not going to go over the whole table, but 41% of the West Hants rate is going towards municipal costs. 71.6% of the Hansport commercial rate is going to municipal costs, and 53.9% of the Windsor commercial rate is going to municipal costs. Based on that comparison, like we did with the former slide, it costs 34% more to operate in Hansport under commercial. It costs 63% more to operate in Windsor under commercial. So when we look at our increase to average property, and I always do my low, medium, and high here. Now, thinking back to that other slide where we had our average residential assessment, that was 211, I believe. Oh, thank you. I knew there was an 11 in there. So even that being the medium where I use 342 is probably a little high considering our average from PVSC. So looking at Hansport, between high and low, we're looking between a decrease of $326 to $33. So from high low. From Windsor, from low high, we're looking at a decrease of 28 to 282. And again, this is using the proposed rates as well as the 2.6% increase in cap. And then under the West Hants rate, from low to high, we're looking at potentially as low as 56 or as high as 559, depending on the assessed value. So looking at our 7-year rate, tax rate comparison. So the dotted lines there are all of our pre-consolidation rates. So what we see here for Windsor was 1.88. For Hansport, it was 1.66. And for West Hants, it was 1.0323. We can see over the years how the tax rate has behaved and how we have increased and decreased over the years. But currently, right now, we are considered 5 cents above pre-consolidation rates for West Hants, and we are lower by almost 40 cents for the Hansport rate and by almost 33 cents by the Windsor rate. Sorry about that. The next slide is including where our general rate is. So thought this would be really interesting. So you can kind of see how our total combined rates are behaving, but you can also see how the general rate has been changing over the years. So currently right now we're proposing our 8.3. So there's not a lot of gap, but you also see a trend which we kind of anticipate with consolidation is everything kind of starts to even out. Everything starts to get closer together. We're still noticing that, there's various operating gaps as we have different growth centers. But over time, those things will kind of even out again. So the other piece that I wanted to highlight here as part of our conversation was the reserve utilization. So I know as part of our requests, we were to look at how our tax rates had behaved and what was our reserve utilization over the last few years. So I specifically looked at West Hants's utilization to mitigate their tax rates. So under the 2021 year, we had utilized 265,021. We still had a 2-cent increase. Under 21-22, we utilized 295,000 and we decreased back to pre-consolidation rates. Under 22-23, we had 219,000 and we reduced it by a penny. In 23-24, we had 0 transfer from reserve and we reduced it by 4 cents. In 24-25, we utilized 1,180,000 and we reduced it by a penny. In 25-26, we utilized 697,000 and we increased it by 4 cents. And currently under this year, we have an increase of 7 cents proposed and no reserve utilization. Moving into our debt servicing. So this will be our debt servicing ratios as they are, as well as our forecast for the upcoming capital budget. So just as a reminder, this is another slide to kind of keep in your back pocket. So if you want to flag it, don't bend a corner, don't know. But this is what $1 million worth of borrowing is. So at our current rate of 7% through a municipal finance division over the various years, terms, because 20 is the max we can take out, and then we can renew for another 5 years. So based on the maximum as well as the current rates, that's what $1 million represents. So under 20 years, it's 70.3. Under 5 years, we're looking at over a penny of 221,000. So looking at our new debt this year, we have a number of items under the new debt. We will be going over the capital items tomorrow during our capital presentation. This is mostly just to say our new proposed debt total for this year is 996, 642. There's a good chunk of this that's being funded through sewer. There's another good chunk that's being funded again through the water utility, which you won't see on this list. So some of these items may be split between this sewer utility and the water utility. For example, the half-ton pickup truck here, that's a split between the sewer and the water utility. So breaking down our total borrowing proposed this year, we have it by department. So we are seeing our capital renewal projects at 8.9 million. A lot of our capital renewal projects have been approved in advance. So I'll kind of review those again with you tomorrow. We have our public works general at 10.24% and 2.2 million. Community development at 330. And then we have fire services at 1,179,659 or 5.27%. And our water utility making up 8.2 million. And then our sewer utility making up 1.3 million. So looking at how our debt ratio has behaved over the last few years, and these are based on actual numbers between 2020 and 2024, and the under review numbers by the province right now of 24-25, and then an estimate that was provided with last year's budget after our budget deliberations concluded for 25-26. So you can see that we started out at 9.4%. We've seen, again, many balloon payments kind of come and go. So you can see there was a balloon payment in 21-22. We had another balloon payment in 23-24. And then we actually just refinanced again in 25-26. So that's, again, some of that in there. But that's how it's kind of behaved thus far. Our total outstanding debt as of March 31st, 2026 is 16.1 million. And our without the water utility added into that, it's 14.8 million. So looking at our estimated debt servicing forecasts over the next 5 years based on our capital budget, and again, that's assuming everything gets done exactly on time and everything within that budget over the next 5 years gets approved as is as of today. So assuming no inflation. So we would see the 8.5% this year, jumping to the 11.9% next year, 13.6% the year after that. And then in 29-30, we would see a jump to 17%, which would put us over the red indicator. And then in 2030-31, we would be at 17.6. So again, there's a lot of assumptions that go into projecting these. That's just assuming everything stays exactly the same in the capital budget as presented when we did the released it. Is there any questions before we head into protective services?
Thank you, Director Rashan. A lot of great information there. So Council, any questions? Counselor Larry Pinch.
Thank you. Through your chair to Director Rochon. I think I just need to say it out loud for confirmation. So with the general rate and the area rate combined, West Hands residents will see a 12-cent increase. No, because general rate's going up 5. West Hands rate proposition is going up 7.
That's the combined.
Thank you.
Combined, it's going up 7 cents.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate that.
No problem.
Counselor Paul Morton.
So just going back on your RCM piece, you noted 70% on one of your slides. We actually pay 90, don't we?
70% gets allocated to the West Hants rate and 30% gets allocated to the Windsor rate. And that's based on the number of officers pre-consolidation.
Any other questions before we move on? Seeing no lights. Oh, Counselor Scott McLean.
Thank you, Deputy. Through you to Director Rochon. Back on page 11 in this booklet, it says change in revenues of 3.260938 million. And then if you go to change in expenses, it's the exact same figure. 3.260938. Just
Yep.
curious.
Yep. So the changes in revenue have to balance to the changes in the expenses. So, because we have to present a balanced budget. However, the lift from last year to this year on the tax side is 2.3. So that amounts to that new revenue.
Okay, just a follow up. So can we be within 5% either way or not?
We are required through the Municipal Government Act to present a balanced budget.
Okay, thanks.
Counselor Ivy.
I guess just can follow up on that question through you to Director Rochon. Director Rochon, so with that, though, when you're balancing the budget, the ability, because the transfers to reserves, is that factored into your balancing of those numbers, which I think is important to understand, that the expenses won't necessarily equal what the revenues are, but with the transfer to reserves is where you have the ability to massage the number to make it balance.
Usually the transfers to and from reserves are the last thing we look at once everything's been kind of entered in and all the new revenue sources have been entered in and our new lift has been entered. Then we can look at what capacities we have, and we try to maintain the capacity set by council in the former year, unless there's going to be something significant, in which case we would then have to get direction from council, because it could mean less contribution, which could then impact debt servicing on the other side.
Thank you. And I know when I first was going through this stuff, that was the thing that was always peculiar to me. Same question is asked by Councilor McLean is, so they balance out and, how did you maneuver? But it's the reserves so we haven't seen the reserve budget yet. I know you've got a list in here that's a summary of the movement on them, but any sense when we'll see that actual reserve budget coming out? Is that?
Yeah. So, as part of our compressed schedule, it wasn't able to be completed as part of our normal. As part of our update in the budgeting workshops, I mentioned that would be the case. The municipality is not required to produce a reserve budget. So one of the benefits of our other schedule was we were able to do that. So typically, in the last couple weeks that we've been preparing for actual budget deliberations, we would typically be finalizing our reserve budget. So now we're kind of moving into finalizing the reserve stuff. So it'll be probably a little while before we bring forward what reserve balances are. I can use projections and I can use best estimates, but it will not be as accurate as what we would normally see. And I'm working on something for council for the next few days of deliberations.
Thank you.
Okay, Counselor John Smith.
Thank you, Chair, through you to Director Rochon. The last page 42, the estimated debt services forecast. So in 4 years' time, 2031, you're estimating that 17.6%. Is that 17.6% of our income would go towards debt servicing? Is that what that means?
So our
Could you
debt
explain
service,
that?
yeah, our debt service ratio basically is our affordability of our debt. So if we look at how it basically our percentage now, and I feel like I have that here. Just give me a sec. So if we look at what our debentures and our long-term borrowing is right now, which is this dark green, we're at 9.8%. I'm projecting our debt servicing ratio at about 8.5%. So it is based on basically our affordability. It's not the percentage of what's in the budget. How it's calculated is it takes basically our total debt payment less interest. So there's going to be a little bit of variance. And then it divides it by certain revenue sources. So to kind of put it into best perspective, if you look at your total tax number, there's a few things that we take away from that, but that's basically what we would see. So it's not even our total revenue that gets calculated for our debt servicing ratio. It's only our tax revenue less sewer and a few other things. Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm not sure if I really understand it, but I can see that it's very high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that
Is there any penalties for being into the red?
So again, that'll be something that we'll have to work with the municipal affairs on. They'll probably monitor, they'll probably watch. But again, that's also just assuming a 3% increase in all of our revenue sources as well over the next 5 years. So there's a lot of variance between that. Again, that's very much a high level estimate, assuming everything stays the same and all inflation is 3%.
Okay. Thank you.
Try something here. That's when your eyes are bigger than your tummy. As you look at the menu of capital projects, you have to make sure your tummy matches your appetite.
Counselor Larry Pinch.
Thank you. So perhaps where some of my confusion comes from is just, it's a great PowerPoint, but I'm trying to compare it between the two and maybe I shouldn't be. But on page 16, it says general rate expenditures for municipal services, protective services projected 4,770,000 up 8.8 or the variance 8.8%. But then when we go down to the West Hants area rate expenditures for municipal services, it says protective services 4,523,531. So that's not 70%. So my brain is confused. Is that because the number where it says general rate expenditures for municipal services should be larger than that? Because I thought protective services was up in like the 7 range.
So under the West Hants area rate, the protective services amount is only RCMP. It's
Okay.
none of the other things.
And is that the same in this general rate expenditures for municipal?
The general rate expenditures is everything less RCMP.
Okay.
So we're talking fire services, building, EMO, bylaw. I had just listed them all out for you guys. Just give me a sec from my memory. Sorry. Okay, so that includes the fire, EMO, bylaw, courthouse, building inspection, and the food banks. And so under the area rated West Hants chart, you're seeing 70% of the RCMP cost. And under the Windsor area rate chart, you're seeing 30% of just the RCMP cost.
Okay, so the protective services categories aren't the same between the chart for the municipalities and the chart for West Hanson.
Yeah. So basically those charts are to show you what costs make up those rates.
Okay.
So they're not going to overlap when you're seeing like the general rated items. That's just what hits the general rate versus what you'll see in the area rated.
I think it's
stuff.
just because they're labeled the same that I was like, this is not adding up, but now
Yep.
that makes sense. Thank you.
So if you added up all those charts, they would equal our total budget.
Counselor Ivy, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I've lost it.
Okay. Okay, we're good to move on to fire service.
So, going into fire services, we have our operating budgets first. With fire services, I've kind of done a summary slide here. So the regional fire budget summary for 2026, we're showing 11.4% increase overall. You can see the variances between all the departments. A lot. So, as part of our deliberation process this year, because it's really changed for fire just due to timing and our condensed schedule. So, what we did with our fire chiefs was we emailed them and basically asked for submissions within a range. So, we said between what cap increase of 2.6 and what we were estimating CPI was going to be in December, which was 3%. It ended up being 3.1%. But the fire chiefs came back and they really tried to stick to that percentage. So that helps. So anything that was over and above that, we tried to ask questions on. But again, most of the chiefs came in underneath of that. So a lot of them we didn't have to follow up on. So that being said, the big increase overall is associated to the regional fire services, which we'll get into. I also received confirmation today from East Hants that of their funding levels for the various fire departments that we have, which in Brooklyn is that in the case of that from funding from East Hants, and that's 105,398 for Brooklyn from East Hants, and then we have a confirmation from our on our rate of 47.2% for the funding for Hantsport from Kings County. So overall, if we look at basically how our chart falls, our biggest department right now is our regional fire at 26. Followed very closely by Windsor Fire Department and then Brooklyn Fire Department. And then, of course, we have Hantsport, Somerville, and Southwest Hants and Brooklyn Station 2. So under our regional fire services category, and again, this one's seeing the biggest increase, and this is because the fire services director was not included in the budgeting numbers, but it was still moved forward with council. So we're expecting a full year of that in this upcoming budget. So that is a big increase as part of that. And then we have our employment related costs associated to that individual. So of course, mileage, training, equipment, safety gear, etc., to get them kind of set up and ready to go. We're also seeing that insurance costs for our fire services are increasing, EAP rates are increasing, and WCB rates are increasing. We also note the firefighting stipend is still in the budget this year. Under Hantsport Fire Department, they came in at 0.7% increase. The biggest adjustment for them was under communications, and that was increase in pager replacements. As I mentioned, we have an agreement with Kings that funds capital and operating, and they're funding that at 47.2% this year. And then we own that municipal fire building. The Kings County grant last year was at 127, so we're going to see a slight increase to the capped amount of 131 this year. Under Somerville Fire came in for total fire expenses of 2% increase over last year. However, you'll note that we did do a decrease last year to the 197. So overall, we're seeing a 6.3%. But a lot of that is attributed to the fire station costs, as we've seen a significant increase in the snow plowing costs of 32.3%. But everything else is pretty much held the same for Somerville. Looking at Windsor Fire Department, Windsor Fire Department is in the 100 King Street building. They pay a rent fee kind of to help supplement the cost of operating that facility. So that has seen an increase this year, as well as the maintenance under apparatus and superintendent. And that again is a staff person. So you're seeing, of course, the increases in mandatory contributions as well as that piece there. So that's under the administration increase. And then we're seeing small increases to public events, honorariums, member recognition, as well as attributing to that 3.8%. Small increases to personal protection and fire suppression, attributing to the 2.8% change in equipment. But overall, their overall increase is at 3.8%. Southwest Hants. So Southwest Hants Fire is seeing 1.8% increase over last year. The proposed society funding is 34,025, which is up 5.4% since 25-26. This is a building that the society owns, and we reimburse the fire station related costs. And then the other related items that have increased is a small increase, again, associated to honorariums, member recognition, but also insurance, which we pay to the society, and general expenses as a result of just general expenses resulting in the increase in administration. Under Brooklyn Fire, so I unfortunately did not have Brooklyn Fire's submission before now. So I did have been in communication with the chief. So how I presented Brooklyn Fire within the budget that you received was an increase of 3%, as well as any carryover projects from the year before that I had seen hadn't had any action as of yet this year, as well as anything that was in the 5-year capital plan as of last year. So I have included some supplemental sheets for you council today based on a submission that I did receive from Brooklyn. It's just not captured within your budgets. And of course, I'll review those. If you just give me 1 second here.
Yeah, they were on our sites. So there's 2 pages for Brooklyn Fire 1, Fire 2, and their capital budget. Everyone should have those now. Okay.
I'm just going to bring them up myself so they're on the screen. Just
Okay.
1 second here. All right. So under the budget, we have from Brooklyn submission, we have a increase for the, I'm sorry, this bar is in my way. Thank you. So we're seeing an increase of 5% in our municipal costs. This is costs that typically we would see or that we would account for within our budget. And then we're seeing an increase of about 16.7% from our East Hants contributions. So that is going from 90,000 last year to 105,000 this year. So that was nice to see from East Hants. And then we have an operating contribution from West Hants. So this would be the operating contribution that we send to the fire services. And that's actually seeing a decrease of 8.7 cents or 8.7 cents, 8.7%. So unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to review this item in detail. So if there's any specific questions associated to the Brooklyn Fire Station budget, I have the chief here with me, and I'm sure he'd be able to answer any questions. And then going into the Brooklyn Station 2, we're seeing an increase in Brooklyn Station 2. So we're seeing an overall decrease in our municipal cost for Brooklyn Station 2 of 7.5%. But we're seeing a 17.4% increase in the contributions to the fire services. So those net together for an overall change of 9.5%. Are there any questions on operating before we get into capital for the fire services?
Any questions, counselors? Seeing no lights. And I understand you guys just received the Brooklyn one, so That we can come back if we have to, I guess, on that one. I don't see any lights, Director Rashawn, so we're good.
Excellent. Okay, so since I have this screen up, I'm just gonna also highlight here before we move into our capital. So in reviewing the submission quickly from Brooklyn Fire, I have noted here some items that will be added to our 5-year plan. So you'll see them in green. So we'll see some changes as we're going through. I'll also be updating costing that came in. So I'm assuming that's a little bit more accurate costing based on quotes that they receive. So anything in red is being updated to a new amount. Anything in green is being added. So just to kind of give you an idea, what you're going to see in the next few slides doesn't include those updated adjusted numbers, but they will when we're reviewing capital tomorrow.
You'll highlight those tomorrow when you go through that.
If there's any questions on the actual capital items, I would encourage you to ask them tonight specifically because the chiefs won't be here tomorrow, but it will be included in the overall totals. So right now they're not included in the total budget at all, the green numbers. So you'll see those increasing the numbers that you see tomorrow. Okay. All right. So I'm just gonna start.
Director Rashawn, I'm just going to stop you for a second.
yeah.
Counselor Remy, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair. What is SCBA? Like what is that?
Self-contained breathing apparatus.
Thank you so much.
All right. So I'm just going to bring up my presentation again. Just give me 2 seconds for that. Because it didn't like me last time. Okay. Right. And I got to get my little laser. Okay. Excellent. Okay. So sorry. Now I have to move this again. Here we go. So going into the capital budgets. So in the capital budget, we of our 5-year capital budget, fire services make up 8.4 million. So again, note that that does not include the updated numbers. So we have 1.4 million in 26-27, 6.9 million in 27-28. And I will highlight that those numbers in 27-28 are already, some of them are already approved numbers because we have ordered apparatus and they're set to be delivered in 27-28. So we'll be paying for them that year. And then we have 80,000 in 28-29, and we have 25,000 in 29-30. So what I'll also do is protective services represents about 4.5% of the 5-year capital. If we look at last year's 5-year capital, they represented about 4.4%. So they've increased by 0.1% from last year. Of the total capital budget right now, Windsor makes up about 4.1% of that 4.5. And Brooklyn Station 2 on the lower side makes up 0.1% of that 4.5. So if we look at the overall 5-year capital budget and how that's all funded, and again, it's very limited in funding what we have to fund those. So we have our reserves, which is that fire operating reserve we contribute to, as well as the historical Windsor fire equipment reserve, which is only able to be utilized by the Windsor Fire Department. And then we have our long-term debt. So 97.3% of the 5-year capital budget is through long-term borrowing. And the long-term borrowing amount represents 8.2 million. The reserve contributions represent 229,000. So when we look at our 5-year capital, we have, or sorry, not 5-year capital, our capital for this year for protective services under 2026-27 86.1% is under long-term borrowing, and 13.9% is under reserve. So the fire combined represents about 3.5% of the 26-27 budget, with borrowing of about 1.1 million. Of the 1.4 million in capital, 712,000 is related to carryover. So 50.5% is related to carryover. Fire annual funding sources. Again, as I mentioned, we have 1.1 in long-term borrowing. Of that long-term borrowing number of 1.1 million, we have 578,493 that are carryover. So 49% of that is carryover. So basically 51% of that debt servicing number is adding to the new debt servicing, whereas 49% is already in the budget. Reserves, we have 229,226 being utilized. So under this, a lot of the Hansport related projects are debt service. And the reason for that is because of the funding agreement with Kings, and they fund a certain percentage of the debt servicing costs. So that's why you'll see most of Hansport's projects going in under debt servicing. A lot of these items are 5 years, so they'll be quickly cleaned up because they're smaller items, but they are funded through 47.2% this year from Kings County. So under Windsor Fire, you'll see that they have the replacement for utility 9. That's 375,000. So that's under debt servicing, as well as the truck bay window replacement, which is 375. That's also debt servicing. So those are going to be big projects. And then we have under Brooklyn Fire Station 1, a lot of this is carryover projects in comparison to the last year based on what was completed. However, the bottom two numbers were what was in the 5-year capital budget last year from Brooklyn Fire, and that would have been in the 26-27 column. So we're seeing the SCBA bottle replacements, and then we're also seeing the compact tractor. And one of those has been updated based on costing. So we'll see that updated as part of our next budget figure. And then Brooklyn Station 2, all carryover projects. So these are just projects I haven't seen costing come in for yet. So again, now that we're getting closer to March 31st, we're going to carry them over as they're either in progress or still needed. And then we have Southwest Hands Fire Department, which has, again, just a few asks here for equipment, as well as some replacements of E5 with the pumper tanker. So again, if there's any questions on any of the capital projects that are in this list, the fire chiefs are here to answer any of your questions. And I would encourage you again with the Brooklyn Fire Station 1 submission that if there's any questions on those green items, please ask those tonight as well, just so the chief is here and can answer any questions.
Okay, Councillor Paul Wheaton.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Director Rashawn, looking at the West Hants Municipal Capital Budget with those green numbers, 2.5 million for pumper tanker 4.
Yep.
What kind of truck is that?
I'm going to look to the chief to come up and assist me with that.
It's a big ticket item is the only reason I'm asking. And I do see it's not until 2028, 29 anyway, but just kind of set off a.
And council will remember, as part of our budget deliberations last year, these were noted that they'd be coming, and and I also noted in our budget workshop that there would be pre-approval requests coming. So this is all associated to what we're seeing here in 27, 28 and 28, 29.
All right, so pumper tanker 4, it's the workhorse of the fire service at Station 1. So it's our first out truck for structure fires. Carries 2,000 gallons of water. The one we have right now is a 1750 pump on it, and unfortunately, that's the cost of replacing those trucks this day and age. Yeah.
Deputy Mayor, if I may, to Chief Titanish, 2.5 million for the price in 28, 28, 29. Is that like a firm deal? Like, we got to know if that's going to go up?
I projected an increase, so hopefully it won't be more than that. So we have pricing right now, and talking with the manufacturers. That's what we project that it will be around come the date of the truck replacement.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Counselor? Counselor Scott McLean?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Deputy Chief or Chief Titanish, sorry. I just had a question on the painting of the Civic Center. Is that like the exterior of the?
I think that's something that you may need to talk to Director Richard about.
Okay.
But I do believe it's for the exterior and recalking of the seams of the concrete.
You good? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well done. Okay. You're out there more than I am.
I was just talking to Gary, that's all.
There you go.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing no lights, you're off the hook unless you have something
May,
more to add.
I was going to say, may I just, so with the East Hants contribution, there's actually another $5,000 there that they had for, I'd have to pull my email up to see it. But it was something to do with development in the area, maybe. I don't know, Carly may remember more right offhand. So what I had figured out here, the total of it, when I combined the two totals, was $110,417, which is a 22.2% increase over what we received last year. Last year, we received about a 14% increase from East Hants. So we're seeing significant increases in the East Hants contribution. My question is when we look at the because I just got the information from East Hants yesterday. I originally had projected just a 2.6% increase in their budget, which, you know, is quite a bit different than what they gave us or project to give us. So when I went in and changed it, I noticed that so with a 2.6% increase, that would put us at $92,684. And then if I go to the next line down, so the operations contributions for West Hants Fire Service, it's a minus 4.1%. So it's a decrease of 4.1%. So this is for Station 1. So when I put the new number in of 110,417, so that changes that to, again, an increase of 22.2%, but it makes the operations contributions for West Hants drop to minus 10.6%. So what it looks to me is like the West Hants contribution is dependent on how much East Hants gives us. So my concern there and my question is the service, the money that is provided by East Hants is to provide fire protection rescue services to East Hants, not to West Hants. And because they've increased their portion by 22.2%, the way the formulas work out here, it makes it so that West Hants doesn't have to pay as much. It's almost like East Hants is paying for West Hants Fire Service. So I think there's some issues with the formulas in this spreadsheet that East Hants portion really needs to be taken out of there, and East Hants money should be for the East Hants portion. And we have some issues here where, I kept the Brooklyn Fire Station's budget between the two stations at 2.6% over last year. But what I'd like to see is that'd be 2.6% for both stations. So what I'm getting at there with that is Station 2 has been underfunded since its inception. And if you take Brooklyn Station 1 as an established fire station, our budget last year was 489,000, let's say. So if we think about our Station 2, so they do about 60% of what Station 1 does as far as call volume, apparatus, members, that sort of thing. So the budget should reflect that. So if you take an established fire department, like I say, Brooklyn Fire Department, $489,000 last year, and you factor in the percentage that you'll quite easily find that Station 2 has been underfunded. So what I've had to do was, you'll see that overall for Station 1, to try and get Station 2 the proper amount of money to operate, Station 1 has taken a 0.5% decrease in order to give Station 2, I think it was let me look here, a 9.5% increase, and that still leaves them short. So by doing the math, to keep it at 2.6% increase since last year, that would put Station 1 should probably be getting about a budget of about 502,000, and keeping in mind that the 60% of what an established fire department does, say, as compared to Brooklyn Station 1, that would put Station 2 at $301,000. So it's drastically underfunded, and we've had to take from Station 1 budget to increase Station 2 to make things work. So I'm asking that you take a good look at the numbers here, and we need to rethink this a little bit. So for this year, I know I was like getting the information in my head. I mean, certainly not as much work as what Carly puts into the budget, but it was a lot of work, a lot of juggling to keep things at 2.6% overall. So yes, you'll see a decrease in the Station 1, and you'll see an increase in Station 2. But overall, if you combine the two stations, is because we consider ourselves one station, we work together. It's basic. It is one station. We're set up. So overall, when you combine the two, it's like I say, a 2.6% increase. Yeah, I think that I probably have said enough about that. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone or not, but.
Thank you. Any questions, Councilor Larry Pinch?
I don't know, this is going to be for Director Roshan or Chief Tatanish. But how can it be 2.6% when the overall increase for one is 9.5 and the decrease for the other is minus 0.5? So that's a 9% increase. So I'm just trying to understand where the 2.6% increase comes from.
So it's a total increase. If you combine the Station 1 and Station 2, the total amounts. So if you combine the two amounts last year and then combine them this year, it's a 2.6% increase.
Okay, maybe we'll leave that for tomorrow, Director Roshan, because I thought you said it was a 9% increase, 9.5. But
That's for Station 2. Station 1 is taking a minus 0.5%.
yeah, so that would.
So when we combine the two, it's total dollars.
Okay.
Right. It's not adding up the percentages. It's the total dollar amount between the two stations.
Got it. And Counselor Paul Morton.
I don't know who wants to answer this, but any of the East Hants money go towards capital projects in West Hants, towards the trucks or equipment or it's just
No.
operational?
Yeah.
Counselor Ivy.
Not on
No.
this, not on Chief Tatanish there. It's
Okay,
separate
so
different question.
no more questions for Chief Tatanish? No. Okay. You're off the hook. Okay. So Counselor Ivy, do you want to,
Yeah, just on capital, we're touching on capital now, right, as well. So just because we've got so mine is with the Windsor, and I think they're the ones that you talked about being pre-ordered, Director O'Shawn. I just want to make sure I'm reading that line right, and it's down on the 27-28 pre-order.
Yeah.
And any sense on timing of those? Like, do we have any sense that those are coming in on time? We've seen before where orders like this can be delayed, and I'm only going back to the curve on that line that we were looking at and just seeing.
Yeah. So one of the things is this isn't included in debt servicing until the 27-28 year as well, because we haven't included up to this point just because of the long lead time. I can't remember when we originally ordered it within 24-25, but it takes a significant amount of time for these to come. So the chief could probably has more of an update on when they're planning to be delivered. But based on that report and what I have here in my notes, expected arrival late 2027 or early 2028. So within the 27-28 year, but I'm going to turn around and look at the chief and just get a head nod and make sure that's still right. Okay.
do you want to come up, Jamie, to the mic, please? Then everyone can hear, please. And those at home will know what we're talking about, so.
Yeah, it is. I know it's about the timing.
Yeah.
And the curve and just wondering.
Yeah.
From our sense, that's all.
So the latest update I got on the two trucks was summer of 27. It's still too early to kind of say if there's going to be any delays because they're still a year and a few months out. But right now they're still on track as far as
the industry generally and
industry generally. They're actually, from what I've heard, they're kind of picking up pace a little bit. They were getting behind, but they're playing catch up. So right now it's summer 27. Hopefully there's no further delays, but that's what we're looking at.
Thank you. And just to follow up if I could, since we've got you here, so that's in relation to engine 4 and rescue engine 4. Is that what?
Yes.
That's what I'm looking at here. The 2.4 and 2.3, 2.4.
Yep.
The other two that are on here within the same year, and I just wasn't able to get the math work because I was doing quick math here in my head, but the other two, one is repair work to tanker 4.
Yes.
At 1.9. And I'm sure that you've already.
That was brought to my attention today that one was mislabeled. So the repair to tanker 4 is actually in this year and it's 22,000. So the pumper tanker is in year 27-28 is 1.9. And then the further adjustment to the last line in the budget, which is in ATV,
1.9 million.
that's 85,000. That's 85,000. So that was just again, it didn't flow through the capital, but it'll be reflected when we're doing our changes tomorrow.
So the pumper tanker that we show at 2,379 should be the 1.9. And
yes.
So we'll see updates on those then. Okay. That's good for me, I think.
Good.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Very much.
Thanks, Jamie. Counselor John Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a question for Chief Tatanish. Sorry, I didn't catch you when you were up here earlier. It has to do with the fire truck that was in an accident recently. I'm just wondering, will that have any impact on the capital? I know it's insured, but there could be other costs.
That Carly and I were going to talk about as soon as she has a chance from dealing with the budget, I believe. So she has been in talks with us, and I believe the insurance has made a decision, and we haven't met yet though.
Yeah, so just to give an update, we were hopeful that we would receive our final number from the insurance company. We still are pending. That still hasn't been received yet. So until we receive that number, we won't really know what our next steps are. But I'll be discussing it with the chief. And of course, there may or may not be decisions of council outside of the budget.
Just to follow up, what's the lead time on another truck?
So that truck is simply a 1-ton pickup. So I have sourced one and priced one already, just to try and get the ball moving. But yeah, I guess it remains to be seen what excuse me, what will come out of the insurance. So
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Hey, Counselor Larry Pinch.
Mine's for Director Roshan, so I'm good if there's anybody else for.
Anyone else for? Nope. Okay.
Okay. Out of curiosity, just so that Kings County's funding gets included into Ant Sports budget. Kings County funding also helps fund capital purchases. Why is the agreement different between Kings County and East Hants?
Good question. That's before my time. But I know the King's agreement we just renewed for Hansport Fire. So that again is with that municipality. They do it a little differently there with their fire services and everything's area rated. So it's just the operations between the two buildings. And I believe the agreement that came out with Brooklyn Fire, and I'm looking at our CAO to kind of help me along here. I feel like that was when the fire boundaries changed with the consolidation. There was always a little bit, but then there was more once the consolidation and the change with the Mount Uniacke Fire Department.
I think the answer is probably that the Kings County agreement was municipally negotiated as Hansport was part of Hansport in the day. So it was more of a municipal relationship, where this current agreement with Brooklyn is more of a fire related rooted agreement, we'll say. So, but something to consider. Yeah.
So we didn't have any part, we don't have any part in the negotiation with East Hants.
It predates me.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
And
There's-
then do we receive those funds or does the fire department receive those funds?
The fire department receives those
Directly
funds.
receives those
Yeah.
funds.
And prior to consolidation, we didn't even receive the number from East Hants. It was very much a number. It would go just to the fire departments. So after consolidation and working with the chief at the time, he noted that. And so I start contacting them once they've set their budget, but we have no influence or no impact on what they set.
But it is our apparatus that we fund from our capital expenditures for West Hants that is responding to the East Hants calls.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions on fire service or anything for the chiefs that are in attendance that are sitting there? Seeing no light.
I've got one.
Oh, Counselor Paul Morton, of
Looking
course.
forward in the future, when we look at fire apparatus, has anybody explored overseas purchases?
That is a question I would defer to our chiefs and or our CAO. But it may be a project that, again, as we get our fire services director as well to kind of help support that process as we're looking forward. But as of right now, CAO is shaking his head, and I'm going to turn around and see what the fire chiefs. We're getting not all shaking their heads no, so nothing as of yet.
Okay. Do you want to come up to the mic and so everyone can hear your comment, please?
So I understand what you're asking. The apparatus in Europe is much different than the apparatus that we run here. That's basically the bottom line answer there. But my question would be, why are we looking outside of Canada instead of looking within our own country that has probably 3 or 4 builders within the country?
And I will add, Councillor Morton, we do have an open procurement process. So even though we haven't specifically sought out pricing within Europe, any project over $1 million is open to bidders internationally, and we would have to consider them if they applied.
I was thinking more China, not Europe, just for the record.
But international would encompass all international. So we have to consider any international bidders over $1 million if they submit a bid on one of our open tenders.
Perfect. Seeing no other lights, Director.
Actually,
Oh, Councillor Ivy.
we'll just follow up to the question or the comment as it related to. So when we put the tenders out, we are doing a broad brush approach. I just want it because it sounds like we're not looking in Canada. Is that, I think we've had some bids come in Canada wide. I'm just curious, are we missing something here that we should be looking at? Is Canada going to be just as good, less expensive? Like, can anybody speak to that?
Yeah. So again, procurement, we are required to post on open public procurement. And that's posted through Nova Scotia procurement. We have to, based on the trade agreements, accept any bid over $1 million on any of our open projects. So from an international bidder. So that would be anything that we post. And so we post on our website as well as the Nova Scotia procurement site as required. We're not required to post anywhere else based on the Nova Scotia procurement. But again, when you're dealing with companies, they will seek you out if that's something that they want, right? To buy and bid. We know that they're on Nova Scotia procurement because other organizations use Nova Scotia procurement, and we are seeing overseas bids on other projects outside of our region. So,
Canadian vendors.
yeah. Oh, yes, of course. Canadian vendors, US vendors, nobody's excluded in the bidding process. It's just who actually applies is the.
Right. And so, I mean, we've had this probably about 5 years ago. I know we were talking about vehicles. And it goes back to that same conversation about, who bids on the tenders and the bids. And so I recall asking the question at the time, and the same thing now is that if, for example, we believe that Canadian manufactured vehicles for fire services was a better value, better quality, and more in keeping with what we wanted here, then why is it that we wouldn't? It's one thing to put the tenders out on a tender process, but we're talking $2 million pieces of equipment that, for that would suggest to me that we should actually be poking the folks that do this kind of work to make sure that they're aware that they fit the tender site. I know that many of them are already aware. They're subscribed and signed up, but I know some of the services that are out there as well are not what I'll call open public. They're membership based, that you sign up to be on a list or on a short list, and that sometimes we end up using those. And I'm just not sure that may be a requirement for a report or something on that to see that we're werewolf is on with those.
The other thing too is we have to be very cautious when it comes to open procurement. So even poking somebody to say, hey, we have a procurement out could be seen as an unfair advantage if you don't contact everybody. So again, we have to be very careful when it comes to that. Because again, there's a lot of rules associated to that. Also, it's all coming down to the scoring. The scoring has to be fair. So even if you get a bid from China, US, Canada, if the scoring is fair and it shows the result of somebody else, we could open ourselves up to liability again if we're choosing a different company over another, because if the scoring is fair, the recommendation is there.
No.
So sorry, that didn't mean to rhyme that, but
No, but that's a very fair comment, and because I've actually been fairly focused on that of late for other reasons, but it's a fair comment that you can only do so much before but it's just to make sure that we've got the guess on whatever is an open public site to be able to do that. So
exactly.
Councillor Larry Pence.
Thank you. Have we ever attempted like bulk open procurement? Like instead of doing this one truck 2027 and then a truck 2028 early and then a truck, have we ever looked at saying we want these 3 trucks together and seeing if the price point is better with what bids we're getting?
I've seen it done 3 times.
Okay.
With the 2 trucks that we have in Windsor Fire Department coming next year, those were procured together. And back in 2016, there was some changes within the fire services department, and there was bulk purchasing of pumper tankers and a few other pieces of apparatus during that time.
Was there cost savings when they were purchased in bulk in comparison to the singular
I
purchase?
can't really comment on the 2026 one or the 2016 one, but I do believe there was cost savings in the Windsor purchase procurement when we took the 2.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Remy.
Through you, Chair. Sorry, I almost forgot my question, so I apologize. This is a simple one. Or maybe. I noticed that there's janitorial and cleaning and then maintenance apparatus superintendent for both Brooklyn Station 1 and I think it was Windsor. It might have been worded something different in Windsor. But are those employees that are on our payroll here at West Hants, or are they paid separate?
So the maintenance superintendent through Windsor and Southwest Hants, because it's shared, is part of on our payroll. The Brooklyn one is not on our payroll.
So would they? Okay. Thanks.
Counselor McLean.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make a comment there about the equipment, like the fire apparatus, like from overseas. I know in my day job, a lot of this equipment has to meet the regulations in North America too to actually land here in North America, to do with like engine emissions and some of the the actual ladders and pumps and stuff too. So just a comment. Thanks.
Okay, seeing no more lights, I'll let you wrap up.
All right. So again, any of the adjustments that I mentioned here tonight will be reflected when we're looking at the overall totals tomorrow, but we won't be highlighting them again individually. So again, chiefs are here. We are going to go now for a break before we head into our water utility.
Perfect. So we're ahead of schedule. So we'll meet back at 8:15. Does that sound good?
That sounds good.
So we're going to sign out everyone at home and we will be back at 8:15. Thank you very much. Perfect. Welcome back. It's 8:15 and we're going to continue on with the budget meeting for Committee of the Whole. And we're moving on to our water utility. So I'll turn it over to Director Rashawn.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just get my screen shared. All right. We are now moving into our regional water utility. So as we move into this, I first wanted to just highlight, we're now into our Schedule C of our rules and regulations under matter 11538. This just quickly shows the rates as of this year. That'll be changing as of April 1st. What you'll see is our consumption rate is increasing by 7.4%. And then the base rates are going to change on various percentage change rates. So when we move over into budgeting for that, we have estimated basically a 5% increase for our overall rate sales. And this would be consumption as well as base. And again, as I mentioned, the consumption rates are increasing by 7.4, but our base rates are changing, varying depending on the size. So just to be conservative, we're looking at about 5%. And this is also based on projections that we have for the current year as well as our 3-year average. Our fire protection rates are increasing as well. And this is again set through the Nova Scotia Regulatory and Appeals Board. So that would be in that Schedule C as well, just further down. And then we have our administration costs that are increasing. And again, the biggest increase, which we've seen from year to year, is the depreciation increase. So in the previous budget year, it was around 697, so almost 700. And as we've seen at year end, it was closer to 1 million. So we've made that adjustment in this upcoming budget. And then we have a 4.1% increase in our administration fees. Our administration fees are based on our total expenses, less our depreciation, non-operating expenses, as well as our taxes. So basically any other internal transfers, we take those away. And then we have our increase in computer services associated to our bulk water station software. So we have currently WinFluid, but that is not being serviced anymore. So we will have to upgrade that in the upcoming year to the new service under WinFluid, which will hopefully, again, improve services at those bulk water stations. We have our professional services also increasing by 46% with a rate study coming up for this year as we have our last year of rates. So we'll look to set rates for April 1st, 2028. We also have additional complex consulting needs as we have increased developments as well as our drought conditions last year. So we have a little extra within our professional services associated to that. We're also seeing in administration, our insurance, training, as well as our public works shared costs, all seeing very small increases. But again, all of these net to the increase that you're seeing within administration of 27.7%. Under supply, source of supply, what you're seeing increase there is the increase due to the new Operation Make It Rain contingency plan. And then we have under water treatment costs, an increase due to inflation resulting in higher costs in power and fuel. And then we have under the increase in transmission and distribution is solely related to power. Overall, within this budget, operational labor and supervision have increased this year based on, again, the salary allocations, which vary from year to year based on where the work is anticipated. But along with the increases this year, there's also cost of living, as well as benefit changes, as well as our mandatory remittance changes. So again, those are going to impact those various categories as well. Debt servicing has increased for the loans coming online associated to the refinancing of the water treatment plant, as well as the Mills Lake project and the van. So those are all projects that have been previously approved, but now have confirmed debenture borrowing amounts. But also as part of the new regulations under the utility, we're budgeting for capital costs that are coming on this year in the capital budget. So you'll see that that increase is associated to that. Because we do have some significant water projects this year. Is there any questions on the West Hants operating budget for the water utility?
Counselor Larry Pinch.
Thank you. Just quickly, that last line, operating surplus deficit, you might have said this and I might have lost it in your going through the numbers. Is the difference there just because we don't have the numbers to fill in the other category, or the 8,616.3% variance?
That's just the variance between the 512 deficit and the 5,008.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
why-
so it's just the formula, the way it calculates the variance
Okay.
between the two negative numbers.
Okay. Thank you.
Counselor Ivy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I guess just a couple of comments here, but one is on what we're showing there for the revenue forecast, which at with the base rates and the revenue at 2.9, I think it's probably going to be closer to 3.9. We're sitting at 2.9 now, up to the end of December with still a full quarter left to go. So I just think that number's got the ability to be pushed about $1 million. I could break it out, tell you what I think it would be, but I don't want to perhaps get that low. But so I think we're missing about $1 million on the revenue side that we want to take into account there, especially since when you translate that down with what we have on the expense side with a $500,000 budgeted loss. As we talked about before, I think we're a little bit out of sync with what we have there for depreciation costs. And you'd referenced we've got the new projects coming online. I'll save a couple of comments on that till we get to capital. But with those new projects coming in, we're sitting at about 1.1 on depreciation now. And so that's only going to rise up when those other projects come on stream this year. So I think we may want to take a look at that. So it might sound good to say we've got an extra $1 million worth of revenue that's pretty much going to automatically be there because of the rate changes. I think there's more expense coming in there too that we probably want to get a little bit tighter on, just so we know what this looks like before we roll into the coming year. Those are my comments as suggestions that I'd look at. But if we're at 2.9 now with, I'm not sure if it was somewhere between 2 and 3 billing periods, there's a fourth billing period to come, and that's going to be about another 900,000. That's 3.9, or I'd say like 4,095,000 if you want me to.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, Director Rashawn is
Just pulling some information there.
problems.
So under the revenue, what I utilized was the actuals that we have for the last 3 years. So that 3-year average, which you can then see in your detailed appendix. But what you'll see for the rate sales is on the consumption side, we have an average of 1.5 million over the last 3 years, and under the base rate sales of 1 million. So again, looking at those two total together, we're at about 2.5 on our average, and that's based on 3 years worth of revenue. So then in addition to that, I then applied what we're kind of looking at our projection and did another average and used that as part of our rate setting today, which again, I rounded that up to 5% based on adding their current projections to the last 3-year actuals.
Counselor Ivy, did you?
Yeah, the only thing I'd say to that is that we only had partial rates rolling through prior to this. So we've got rates there without the rate increases rolling through. But based on what we see for consumption, this is where it's dangerous for a counselor to get a view of consumption numbers. But when we look at the consumption numbers and we look at the rates and roll them up, it'll end up being 4 million. We're not going to finish the year at 2.9. We're probably going to finish at around 3.6. And so all I'm doing is rolling what I think we'll end the year at by this 5, between the 5 and 7, whether it's just a comment but I would really encourage that we take a look at that because it's significant to the bottom line. I don't want us forecasting a $500,000 loss if in fact it's going to break even, especially if you're going in for a rate hearing this year. I think it's important that be snug and tight. So it's just based on the work that I've done that I'd say that that's probably closer to where we want to be.
Counselor Wheaton?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. To Director Rashawn, what is sprinkler services?
So we have a sprinkler rate within our rules and regulations. So buildings that have sprinklers get a special rate applied to their water bill. So that's just it. So that can be made up of various institutions, but typically it's an institution or an apartment building.
Okay, seeing no more lights, we'll continue on.
All right. So West Hant's water debt as of March 31st, 2026 is at 1.3 million. So that's the total outstanding debt for the water utility. Debt servicing equates to 11.7% of the total operating budget and non-operating expenses of the utility. If we take away the new additions of this year, and again, the new additions are what we have planned in our capital budget. So assuming that they come online this year, if we remove those, we would actually be at about 3.1% of our debt servicing. So 3.1% of our operating costs are associated to debt that we already have borrowed. So moving into our 5-year capital under water utility. So we have our water utility represents 16.1% of our 5-year capital, which has increased since last year at 10.6%. We're utilizing this year as part of our utilizing over our 5-year capital, $2.3 million in reserve funding, 162,971 in water operational funding, 582,508 in user funding, 19,276 in long-term debt, and then provincial and federal grant funding of 7.7 million. So you can see each of the tables here. Obviously, our water operations makes up our smallest amount, so we usually use that for regular replacements, that we see on a regular basis, funded through the operations. And then we have our reserve funding, which of course is our depreciation and capital reserves for the water utility. We're noting that capital reserve is a new reserve created as part of this new board order 11538. So any of the debt funding that isn't utilized in this year, or any depreciation that we've analyzed isn't coming on this year, gets moved into that reserve and then utilized when it comes online. So then we have our provincial and federal funding. Some of the funding has been confirmed. Some of the funding is anticipated to be applied for. So again, we do run a little bit of a risk there on any applications that are either pending or haven't been submitted yet. But again, this is also our 5-year capital. So hopefully assuming that there's still provincial funding available over the next 5 years as well. But with the 19 million, if we consider what the overall region has, and you're looking at the overall 5-year capital, I think it was when I was meeting with our CAO reviewing all of this, he kind of mentioned it increased really here where we're increasing a lot of capacity. We're joining our networks. It's like a one-time big infrastructure project, but then you see it even out a little bit more as the next 4 years go along. So it is true. We do have a significant amount of projects this year, but a lot of them will only create further resilience, create increased capacity, and just, again, makes it even more connected system. So I could go on a little bit more, but I'm sure Todd would be better talking about those programs and connectivities than I would be. So moving into 26-27, so of the 26-27 utility, the utilities combined represent 41.3% of the 26-27 capital budget, with 12.1 million in carryover. So of the 16.7, 12.1 is carryover. And of the borrowing this year, we have 8.2 in borrowing. So a little less than half. All borrowing is associated to carryover projects. So again, those are those big projects that you're seeing here at the top that are in the works, have been approved, or have additional funding associated to them as well. So under the water funding for our capital projects this year, we have water operating funding 39 $1,944. So you would have seen that in the non-operating for the water utility under that expense. We have water capital slash depreciation paying for 484,432. We have long-term borrowing, as I mentioned, paying for 8,214,000. And that's all associated to carryover projects. And then we have user paying for 282,508. Again, a lot of the user funding stuff is associated to meter related costs. And then we have provincial and federal funding under 7.7. Some of the funding sources that my apologies. Some of the funding sources that we have confirmed right now are grid funding. So we have received grid funding that's been confirmed. We also have the municipal capacity grant that is helping fund the water storage tanks. So that is also part. And then of course, as other grant programs, and again, we're still waiting for some of them to open up to apply, but we do have the interconnect between Falmouth and Windsor flagged as a project that we'll be applying for grant funding on. Are there any questions about the capital? And I'll just note, sorry, just before we jump into questions, the half-ton pickup here is shared between sewer and water. So that's one of the pickups that you've seen in the debt servicing with sewer shared.
Okay, Councillor Remy.
One truck.
Yeah.
Through you, Chair. Just a comment more so than anything else. I think when I am reading this, and I appreciate all of the work and all of those things. So if this is a pain, I apologize. But just to know which of these are carryover, like when we're looking at that list would be very useful. So we know like what is new to this budget and what was in the previous ones. And I apologize if that's listed somewhere. You can just let me know, but it probably is.
It is within the detail budget document that you have, which is okay. But if you'd like, I just need to flip to the water utility and I can quickly outline those few projects that are carryover. So our water storage tank is carryover. So this would be the portion that hasn't been expensed yet. We have our filter redundancy water treatment plant third process train that's a carryover. And then we have our Windsor Falmouth interconnection that's a carryover. As well as our Mills Lake diversion pipe carryover. But those are the 4 projects that are all been carried over, which again amount to the bigger 8.2.
I don't know who was first. I'm going to come up the line. Councillor Larry Pinch.
Nice try.
Yeah.
If we end up with a surplus instead of like the projected 500,000 deficit, what do we do with that surplus? Like, where do those funds get dispersed?
I didn't realize my light was off. It gets placed in a surplus deficit account. So it kind of creates that operating buffer as we go along in operations. It would be noted in the rate study as part of that surplus draw. So last year they had budgeted, I think, 500,000, I think, to be withdrawn. I'm getting my years confused, but they usually use it to help smooth rates when they're doing a rate study. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So it will be, if that happens,
Yeah.
it will be used to help
Yep.
the ratepayers. Okay. Thank
Yep.
you.
Councillor John Smith.
Thank you. Question to Director Rochon. The 8.5 million for the interconnection, what percent of that would be covered through grants? What would we be hoping for?
So I'm going to look at Tim to come up for this question because him and I have been chatting about what program we might be able to apply for, though it hasn't been launched yet. But he's been doing a lot of research on the funding percentage of that project.
Sure. So through the chair, it'd be similar to the ICIP program from the past. So this one would be called CHIF funding, and it's around 73-74% external funding. So about as good as it gets for programs.
Well, just a follow-up question.
Sure.
So if we weren't successful in that, is this something that we could delay for a year and apply again the following year?
I would say that the project does depend on the external funding right now.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Councillor Ivy.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So one question, I'll start with, and I'm in the 5-year capital, just working my way down the list here. Like the water storage tank is part of a carry forward. So Storage tank's in full service now, though. We've filled it. It's functioning. Am I correct on that, for the past month or so? Am I in the ballpark? So we haven't expensed that yet. Like, why would we carry that over if it's there and has the ability to be expensed? And
This is one of the risks of a condensed schedule because these budgets were prepared and submitted beginning of January.
okay.
Yeah, there is a holdback.
So we're still in this fiscal. Is there any chance that'll be cleared? Or is that not likely given the holdback situation? I mean, like, it's significant on the holdback if I could. Whoever.
So through the chair, as of March 31st, the carryover might be less than what it's shown now, but there still will be some through the holdback.
Okay, so thank you. Holdback, percentage, is it, or
10%.
10%? Okay, so about half of this. Thank you for that. I've got a few others that may, because the other ones come down to timing and the size and the magnitude of the projects that we have here that were intended for, I guess, 25, 26, that we're carrying them over, and our capacity to get those completed in the coming year. And just from a, I don't want to get so deep into this that I'm not suggesting that, but the ability for us to get those done from a timing standpoint, again, which goes to use of capital, debt, and the depreciation coming through. Do we anticipate that we can see both the filter redundancy, third process train, as well as the interconnection done in the same year?
So
Sorry.
Through the chair, the third process train, I do anticipate being completed this coming fiscal year. The interconnection, I wouldn't. If we are successful on the grant, then that would be tendered in the fall. Right. And construction would be 2027.
Gotcha. Okay. I just looking at it again from use of capital and timing. So if there's something that makes sense to shift, then, and then the other one is the diversion pipe, which is back in there, which I'm a bit surprised, given that we only dealt with that a couple of months ago. And I'll just leave it at that for now, I guess. That's it for me on capital. Thank you. Thank you, Tim.
I was going to say the engineer's onboarding is completed, so he's really going to hit his stride this year.
Well, my comment meant to suggest that you aren't. Don't really, not at all. It's
honeymoon's over.
I will say, like, most of our smaller projects in the water utility did get completed last year, so none of them got carried over. It's only our big multi-year projects that got carried over.
Absolutely.
And I would also, I know that the diversion pipe is back in there, but again, this is to create capacity so that, and authority so that that can be tendered if we go back to tender.
Hey, Councillor Paul Morton.
I have a question on the half ton. How many half tons do we have in the fleet for the water utility service?
So for water treatment, and water distribution, we have 6 pickup trucks. And they service 3 water treatment plants and 3 wastewater treatment plants and a full distribution system in all remote locations.
Okay, Councillor John Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Question around the water meters. So are these water meters, the $100,000, are those the ones with that ability to detect leaks?
So that's so there's a report coming at April Committee of the Whole, and so that's our proposal to switch to these acoustic sensing water meters. So that is part of the pilot program. So that $100,000 would be for that pilot program, correct?
Okay, great, thanks.
Councillor Larry Pinch.
Thank you. The pickups that are in here to be replaced, one's a 2015, so 11 years old, that makes sense, but the other one's only a 2020. Is there something that occurred with it, or is it high mileage, or it's a big repair?
So there's two on there. So, and there's only one. So we reduced the price. If we could buy two pickup trucks for, $70,000, that would be great. But so we lowered the price. We did have two initially, through our budget deliberations internally with CAO and Director of Finance. We did cut one back. So it's the 2015, unit 29 that's proposed to be replaced. And we're going to hopefully keep the, unit 28, which is the 2015, be replaced, and we're going to hold on to the unit 29 for a bit longer. So they're both in need, but and they do both have high mileage, probably 250,000 kilometers on that, and that's that's a lot of short back roads, a lot of remote locations, so that and a lot of stop and starts with those vehicles for meter reading and all the checks and balances the guys do. So, but it's just one. So, and that I think Director of Finance pointed out, half is on the water utility, and the others comes out of sewer.
Okay, seeing no more lights, we can move on. Director Rashan.
So our last is just a kind of update on our water capital reserves. So based on our expected water utility ending reserve balance, our depreciation capital reserve is at 988. With our estimated depreciation and capital contributions, with an increase of 1% yearly, so again, very conservative, we're looking at about 5,700,000 going into that reserve. Anticipated spends in this capital budget from that reserve are 4.8, leaving a balance at the end of March 31st, 2031 of 1.9 million. Are there any further questions on water utility before we conclude our deliberations today?
Councillor Ivy.
Yeah, so it's not on the water utility, and I'm not trying to jump but sewer, which is a factor of water, we're doing that tomorrow. Is that correct? And so if I can jump this in here, though, I would like to see a breakout on what we have there for the consumption, the sewer flow amount compared to the base charge. If we can get that broken out, I'm not sure if it's simply a percentage, I can, use that, but they're combined together in that line, which is distinct from the way you're showing the water. And having the water broken out with it too is actually really helpful in knowing what we have going on there. So just as a comment.
Yeah.
The other.
Oh yeah, through your another question.
Yeah, it's on tonight overall. A couple of things. It's not just on water. So if you want it just to be water, then I'll wait. But I've got.
Is there any questions on water? Are you done, Director Rashan, on the water? Yep.
I'm done.
Sorry,
What
I
is?
didn't mean to.
No, but just.
So the question is on protective services. We were talking about that. We don't see grants in that area at all. Like, are there grants, or is it that we get them, or what happens in that area of the business that are grants possible at all?
Based on what I'm aware of, there is grants. A lot of the funding, like grant funding, comes through their 50/50 fund, but there is some are like emergency services provider. But again, only certain stations are available every 3 years, I think, for that emergency service provider grant. So I can't speak to all of the funding that's out there, and depending on what they're applying for, there might be other funding available to them as well. But those are the only options I know, is the 3-year municipal fire services grant and then the 50/50 funding.
And the fire services grant, that would be a function of the fire departments themselves, or is that us? Like who has the ball with that?
Typically, it's the fire departments applying, and they apply every 3 years. So
Okay.
it's something that goes through the province. So usually they know when that year is coming up. I believe Windsor got it last year. I want to say I can't think of who got it the year before that, but they do tend to. I think there was a $20,000 grant last year in Windsor's budget that you would have seen that was associated to that fire service grant.
Okay, thank you very much.
And maybe when we have our fire service coordinator director in, that could be something that they look at going forward.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Not a lot of big money, not a lot of big grants for apparatus, which is really where that is. And I
Yeah.
think some will call CCBF was amended and adopted, but it's really new stations, new things, not replacements. So if you're going to build a new fire station and outfit it, probably, but we've been through that.
Yeah.
So,
That boat sailed.
so yeah, so that would not, most of our items are not eligible for that. Yeah.
Counselor Larry Pinch.
I was just gonna say, just for information, only because I applied for one through Southwest Hands. Over 3 years ago, we received enough to like purchase a generator that's like comes on automatically, but typically it's around the $20,000 mark, and they have very specific requirements for what it has to be. And it is every 3 years that you can apply, and obviously there's a small pool of funds and a whole bunch of departments who apply for things.
Perfect. So you're Director Rashawn, you're all good. Director Richard, do you have something you
Yeah,
want to?
just one clarification.
Yeah.
I misquoted the pickup trucks for water and wastewater treatment. So we have 4 pickup trucks, but we have 1 small utility van, a little Ford Transit van. So 5 kind of utility vehicles in total for water and wastewater treatment. So I didn't want to say we had 6, but we do only have 5. My fleet manager, texted me and corrected me. So
I was gonna say,
it's
was
good to have
Troy
the
watching?
folks, he's right on that. So thanks, Ian.
Troy's watching and keeping you in line. That's great. Okay, folks. Well, that wraps it up for this evening. So we will be back tomorrow for Committee of the Whole budget meetings at 12 noon, and looking forward to seeing as many as we can around the table or on Zoom. So have a good night.